I would like to call the meeting of the Board of Directors for the Des Moines Public Schools to order for November 21st, 2017. Please take the roll.
Natasha Newcomb.
Here.
Ms. Delagardelle Shelley.
Here.
Ms. Langford.
Here.
Ms. Caldwell-Johnson.
Here.
Ms. Ellsburn.
Here.
Ms. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Barron.
Here.
The first item on our agenda this evening is approval of the agenda. Are there any special requests? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion and a second to approve the agenda.
Motion. I'll second.
We have a motion from Anderson and a second from Ellsburn. Please vote. Motion carries 7-0. The next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. May I have a motion and a second to approve the November 7th, 2017 minutes?
I move. Second.
We have a motion from Langford and a second from Natasha Newcomb. Any discussion or corrections? Hearing none, please vote. I actually meant to abstain. There we go. Motion carries 6-1. We have no district recognitions tonight, so the next item on our agenda are the consent items. I would like to remind the audience that we allow any person the opportunity to speak to the board for 5 minutes following the presentation of an agenda item. If anyone wishes to speak to an agenda item, please go to the information table to sign up. Remarks must be germane to the agenda, and we ask that you avoid reference to personalities and character attacks, as those types of comments serve no productive purpose. As a reminder to the board and public, the board will not engage in discussion or deliberation with a speaker regarding comments made to agenda items. Discussion and deliberation will remain among the board members at the board table, with speakers' comments informing said discussion, deliberation, and determination as deemed necessary. We appreciate your input. Ms. Ellsburn, I believe that you have the consent motion.
I do. I move that the board approve the consent items in accordance with the recommended action for each item on the consent agenda, including bills previously authorized, certified, and approved for payment by the board secretary in the amount of $2,750,920.79.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion from Ellsburn and a second from Barron. Is there any discussion on the consent items? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is a series of public hearings. I'll call the first public hearing to order on item E1, purchase of property at 3260 East Douglas Avenue. I believe that we have a speaker. Actually, we may have a couple of speakers signed up. The first is Mr. Ethan Standard. Mr. Standard, your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, thank you. Ethan Standard, 1307 48th Street. Good evening. I'm here tonight before the board to express my opposition to the purchase of property at 3620 East Douglas Avenue for the amount of $595,000 for the purposes of later constructing a new $15 million elementary school. This proposal comes to us roughly a decade after two neighborhood elementary schools, Douglas in 2003 and Adams in 2007, were sold off for a combined price of just under $300,000. That was $300,000 for two fully functioning elementary school buildings, and now we're talking about $600,000 for an empty piece of land. Rather than purchasing new property and building a school completely from scratch, why not make use of existing assets in these communities that may currently be underutilized? I would much rather see the board buy back one or even both of these schools, put some money into updating them, and fill them with students once again. Even if it costs $5 million to update the buildings, that leaves $10 million remaining to be spent on maintenance on other buildings throughout the district. There was a quote in the Register article that I read from Mr. Bill Good that read, "History is what it is. I don't try to justify the past, it's already happened. All we can do is impact the future needs of our students." I couldn't agree with that statement more. However, I think there is a difference between trying to justify the past and learning from it. Look, we all make mistakes from time to time, and I'm not even saying that what happened with those schools a decade ago was a mistake. Nonetheless, it was a decision that, looking back on, might have been handled differently with the hindsight we're now afforded. Today, I'd like to see us avoid compounding on that by building an entirely new school to the tune of $15 million. With the existing schools, everything is already there. The water lines, sewer lines, parking lots, driveways, sidewalks, playgrounds, gyms, classrooms, you get the point, everything. If approved, it has been stated that the new school could open for the 2020-2021 school year and serve up to 450 pre-K through 6th grade students. Buying back the old schools could open up even more classroom space by 2019, an entire school year sooner. I also know that part of this proposal involves expanding the district's Montessori programs. Dr. Ahart has stated that because the Montessori school is on the far west edge of the district, there really isn't as much access to Montessori as we'd like there to be. We think having one on the east side makes a lot of sense. I think that makes a lot of sense too. And I fully support the expansion of our district's unique public Montessori offering on the east side of our city. It's not lost on me how exciting it sounds to be building the first Des Moines school from scratch in over 50 years, but I'm asking you to please consider exploring alternatives that may be more fiscally prudent while yielding a better outcome for our students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for being here. I would like to call William Fors. Name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is William Fors. I live at 3227 East Shawnee. As the address adjacent the property that you're going to buy. And my concern was of the value of the property, the tax, if it's gonna raise our tax value. And I spoke with Mr. Good, and I'm gonna meet him as far as the site plan on how it is going to be set in the property. And I was just wondering if, since you are building a new school, instead of using the other two that he was talking about, on how it's going to beautify and help the east side in our neighborhood and how it's going to turn out to be, basically. So thank you for your time. I'm going to actually talk with Mr. Good, and he's going to help on my question, basically, what's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And our next speaker is Connie Petrie. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Connie Petrie. My address is 3219 East Shawnee. This proposed property purchase is just south of our property. It will back up to several of the neighbors' properties. And we have a lot of concerns. One, the purchase price. The fact that you're taking another 18 acres off the tax rolls when we did have, I agree with the other people, we did have two perfectly good schools that could have been updated. I don't know what the status would be as far as purchasing those back and updating them, but we do have concerns about that. Traffic, what children are going to go to this school if it is built. Obviously, you don't need 18 acres to build the school, so what will be done with the property that's not used for the actual school itself? Just a lot of concerns with the traffic, the neighborhood. Like I said, what children will be going there? Are we going to bus kids in? If so, we're kind of defeating the purpose of purchasing this, because I read that part of the problem was you are busing kids elsewhere and you want to cut down on the busing. But how it's going to affect our properties, our property taxes, our values, and all that. And we will be in the meeting also with Mr. Good to voice our concerns. And I just had, when will it be voted on? When will the actual purchase be voted on?
Well, tonight we're having a public hearing for the purchase of the property, so
Okay,
the vote will take place.
okay, tonight? Okay, thank you.
Those are the only speakers that we have for this item, so I would now ask that we close the public hearing, and we ask the superintendent to please introduce the matter.
Excuse me. My computer's not. There we go. I got it.
Okay.
I recommend the board approve the purchase of the 18.29 acre property located at 3260 East Douglas Avenue, Des Moines, Iowa, in the amount of $595,000 following the public hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Ahart. May I have a motion and a second to approve the purchase of the property at 3260 East Douglas Avenue?
I'd move approval.
We have a motion from Barron and a second from Ellsburn. We'll now open it up to any questions from the board or comments. Yes. Ms. Langford?
Just a couple of those questions that were just surfaced by a couple community members. I just want to do some fact checking or fact comparison, because $15 million and the price that we're like approving tonight to purchase are two different figures. $595,000 and $15 million are two different figures. So can we just get some clarification on where that figure might have come from? And
Oh, I think the 15 million figure was an estimate of what the construction of the building may cost. Yeah.
do we have any thoughts or response to that? I know not for them, but for our voting purposes.
Well, what was mentioned this evening, two properties that we no longer own, to our knowledge, are not available for purchase. So, we've been looking for space for quite some time in that whole quadrant of the city, and have been unable to find anything suitable that was for sale. So, from my perspective, this is really our only reasonable option to move forward with adding capacity on the northeast side.
No, that's my question.
Yes, Natasha Newcomb.
Yeah, I know I had, I drove past the location, actually it's a beautiful location. And then I know I had sent you an email, I apologize, I failed to follow up on the history of the particular, with the closing of the two other schools. I know you're gonna look into it, and I didn't follow up for this evening's.
So what's your question
Well,
exactly?
I know it was raised a few times, but I wasn't on the board, or I'm just probably relatively new to Des Moines. So I guess if you have any history about
For the closing?
the
The
closings,
question
and then now,
the question you asked before, it was more expansive than that. But those two buildings over there that were mentioned this evening were I'm not sure when they were closed. They were sold on the dates that Mr. Standard said.
Yeah.
And since neither Bill Good nor I worked in the district at the time, my working assumption is that there was lack of enrollment on the northeast side. This is my understanding, and that there was excess capacity, and those two buildings in particular were in need of were being underutilized because of the students that resided in those areas, and were in need of significant renovation. So I think the district's decision was, since they were closing buildings, and there were other buildings that closed in other parts of the city at the time, that part of the consideration was to what capacity were the buildings being used, and also what reinvestment in the buildings were necessary to keep them a viable part of the district's portfolio.
I have another question, and again,
Yeah.
you might not know off the top of your head, just being on that street, it's relatively narrow. Is there?
Douglas, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea would be that and this all needs to be worked out with
Right.
site planning and stuff, but there's a potential of the main entrance being on the east side off of, I want to say it's Colfax. I may have that street name incorrect.
Okay.
There's already an easement existing to that property.
Okay.
I would just like to raise up just the idea of who will be the students that will be going there. Are we expecting that this will function similarly to a neighborhood school, and this could just be as a new board member, I'm not fully aware of who goes to Kohl's, but the feedback that I've heard from the community is that it's not completely people in that area of the city, that people will move there thinking, oh, then my kids can go there, but there's not often space.
So about 5 years ago, the district had 6 different schools, I think it was 6, that were schools that did not have a neighborhood, that were purely choice schools, as the district called them. So Kohl's was one of those, Downtown School, Walnut Street, Phillips, Jefferson, and Goodrell Middle School was the only secondary level school. Since that time, we've created boundaries around each of our schools. And so the first priority are the resident the residents of that boundary area. Coles is so there are some schools that don't have enough families purely because of location. Downtown school is one of those. If you have to draw a huge circle around downtown school in order to pull in enough students. Walnut Street is the same way. So a lot of those students don't actually live in the residence. Coles is unique in a couple of ways. One, it's on the far west side, so when you carve a boundary, you're virtually forced to go east, which starts to encroach on other schools' boundaries. And then two, since it starts as third grade, 3-year-olds in preschool, and since the boundary was not established until a few years ago, there are a lot of students in that building. We didn't kick anybody out once the boundaries were created. So there were a lot of students in that school already by virtue of the former enrollment method and no attendance area that continue to be in there. So as time goes by, there will be more and more space for the actual attendance area students, and that's how we intend to open a new school if we were to build one in the Northeast.
Okay.
And just to further illustrate, there's been some concern, not expressed tonight, but has been expressed via email about students crossing East Euclid, which is a very busy street. Well, we actually think there will be fewer students crossing East Euclid because all the students that live north of East Euclid now have to go south of East Euclid to attend either Garton or Brubaker, most of them. And all of those students who are already residing north of East Euclid then would not have to cross. So there will be some busing, but we think that total amount of busing will actually be reduced if indeed we're able to build this school.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm understanding, we would draw new boundaries, and students directly around that school would have first priority to attend that school.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when we're talking about 18 acres, that's quite a lot for an elementary school. And, there were several concerns raised about the impact on the neighborhood. What is kind of the vision or idea? I know we talked about this a little bit by email, but can you remind me, what was the vision or the idea that we would be also doing with the property?
Well, the best way for us to get the property was to have it was already
Buy the
one
whole-
parcel, was to buy the whole parcel. And so now that if indeed we get it, then we'll immediately begin work on figuring out where on that property we can best situate the school and take advantage of the natural terrain. And then there will be additional land, and that will be a decision we'll have to make, whether that's land that is resold, for some other purpose. That's a question we'll have to answer.
Okay.
But a very appropriate question.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Yes, Ms. Anderson.
And you mentioned the other two schools are not available to purchase. Did you mention that earlier? Or?
Well, they're currently owned and occupied by other, by other entities.
And with the Montessori schools, I mean, if it's approved and opens, and the philosophy and the method, it does. I guess it's best to start with 3-year-olds, to 6-year-olds. How will you support or honor that philosophy and method? Will the school just be completely full? They're not going to have the Montessori potentially the experience.
What we're considering doing, if we're able to move forward with this, is to actually start some pre-K programs at another site for the students that would attend there before it's built, so that we can at least have the 3-, 4-, 5-year-old program starting as full Montessori, and then transition them up. So we would intend to fill the building immediately, but the Montessori programming would have to transition up. Because
so
we won't,
eventually it would.
right? Because it won't, as you know, it won't work real well to bring a bunch of students in at, say, 4th grade who have not had a Montessori experience and expect that to be to have integrity.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Additional questions, Mr. Barron?
What's the and is this elementary, or are we planning to go up to 8th grade as we do with Coles?
We were planning on going through 6th grade.
6th grade. Okay.
Yeah.
And there is also, I think much has been stated, and I don't wish to restate anything else, but there is a benefit in constructing a new school that aligns to the vision of a Montessori.
Yes.
So significant access to outdoors.
Yes.
With each classroom, isn't that the?
Ideally, each classroom would have immediate access for primarily security reasons. We don't know that we would design it just that way, but we would have very easy access, easier access certainly than Coles has right now, for instance, which was I think, as everyone knows, an existing school that transitioned into Montessori. Yeah.
And I have some knowledge of the condition of Wallace, and we do not want that building back, unfortunately, for that neighborhood. We redrew elementary boundaries about 3 years ago, I think, 4 years ago.
I think it was. I think it would be 4. Yeah, I think 4
front end
years
of my
ago.
board term. So we'll be due again with the wasn't the.
We're working on it right now, actually. Yeah.
Is that right? Okay. Starting with elementary, or are we going to do secondary first?
Well, actually, we've made a couple of adjustments to secondary when we did we started with if you. I don't know, I lose track of when everybody joined the board, but when we redrew secondary boundaries for the first time in over 25 years, we did not redraw, we didn't have a boundary for Goodrell Middle School, which was the only secondary choice school. Then the following year, when we drew the elementary boundaries, we also incorporated a change in the boundary for Goodrell. And we've made, I think, one adjustment to that since, just to adjust for enrollment at the middle school level at Harding, Hoyt, and Goodrell. And so presently we're working on some boundaries, elementary boundaries, which we don't foresee changing dramatically, but there will be some adjustments in the southeast as well as the northeast.
Okay.
And perhaps a few small ones on the rest of the district, but yeah.
I appreciate it. This is a good proposal. I look forward to supporting it.
Great.
Ms. Ellsburn, any comment? Thank you. So hearing no additional board questions or comments,
Sorry. Real quick, since it was brought up, and I don't recall really much information on it, and you may not know the answer to this, and I know Bill's working on it. As far as like the tax increase within that area, completely out of your realm possibly here.
can't anticipate.
The impact.
There, as I understand our city's tax code, I don't think the purchase of a single property, has any direct impact on tax rates for that particular neighborhood.
Okay.
So the addition of a school wouldn't necessarily change that. Or maybe none of us know the answer to that question. That was kind of where that was something that wasn't brought up. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a question, I think, for the assessor. But as I understand it, they wouldn't recalculate the taxes in that neighborhood because a property was sold to a public entity.
Okay.
I'm pretty confident in that, but we can check with the tax assessor.
I know we're not, tax assessor experts.
Right.
Yeah.
It would be a land use change, though.
Yeah, this land would be taken off the tax rolls, but I don't think that impacts the neighboring properties in terms of what their tax rate would be.
Another question? Any additional questions? We have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the purchase of the property at 3260 East Douglas Avenue. Please vote. Motion passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is our second public hearing this evening, item number E2, Jefferson Elementary re-roofing project. Is there anyone wishing to speak to this item? Hearing no one, I will close the public hearing, and I'll ask the superintendent to please introduce the matter.
I recommend the board review and approve the plans and specifications prepared for the re-roofing project at Jefferson Elementary following the public hearing.
May I have a motion and a second to approve the proposed plans and specifications for the Jefferson re-roofing project?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion from Ellsburn and a second from Anderson. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I just have a clarifying question as I was rereading through this. When this says to correct the moisture filtration problems, is this part of our regular routine maintenance, or was there a problem on the roof?
I'm going to have to lean on Mr. Good for that. I can't answer that one specifically.
Like most of our capital needs, we have a 5-year plan for roof replacements, so this was a projected one. So is there something wrong with it? It needs to be replaced. Is it leaking?
Yeah.
No, but it's aged up to the point where it's scheduled to be done, so.
Okay, yeah. No, Thomas had gone over that plan with me. I'd looked at that, and so that's what I was trying to put into context for myself, that this was part of that plan. And, it wasn't raining on some poor student's head at Jefferson, so.
Yeah, the difference between the other capital improvement plan is statewide penny. This is PEPL, Physical Plant and Equipment Levy.
Okay.
And we have individual 5-year plans for masonry, roofing, concrete, all of those things.
Okay, yep. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comment from the board? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the Jefferson Elementary re-roofing project. Please vote. Motion passes 7-0. The next public hearing is item number E3, King Elementary re-roofing project. Is there anyone wishing to speak to this item? Hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing, and I'll ask the superintendent to please introduce the matter.
I recommend the board review and approve the plans and specifications prepared for the re-roofing project at King Elementary School following the public hearing.
May I have a motion and a second to approve the proposed plans and specifications for the King re-roofing project?
Second.
We have a motion from Langford and a second from De La Gardelle Shelley. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Please vote. Motion passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is public hearing, item number E4, King Elementary Exterior Masonry Restoration Project. Is there anyone wishing to speak to this item? Hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Ask the superintendent to please introduce the matter.
I recommend the board review and approve the plans and specifications prepared for the exterior masonry restoration project at King Elementary School following the public hearing.
May I have a motion and a second to approve the proposed plans and specifications for the King Elementary Exterior Masonry Project?
Second.
We have a motion from Ellsburn and a second from De La Gardelle Shelley. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 7-0. I will now call the public hearing to order for item number E5, McKee Education Center Exterior Masonry Restoration Project. Is there anyone that wishes to speak to this item? Hearing no one, I will close the public hearing and ask the superintendent to please introduce the item.
I recommend the board review and approve the plans and specifications prepared for the exterior masonry restoration project at McKee Education Center following the public hearing.
I would entertain a motion and a second to approve the proposed plans and specifications for the McKee Exterior Masonry Project.
A motion.
Second.
We have a motion from Natasha Newcomb and a second from Anderson. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 7-0. And finally, I will call to order the public hearing for item number E6, Oak Park Elementary Exterior Masonry Restoration Project. Is there anyone that wishes to speak to this item? Hearing no one, we'll close the public hearing, and I'll ask the superintendent to please introduce the matter.
I recommend the board review and approve the plans and specifications prepared for the exterior masonry restoration project at Oak Park Elementary School following the public hearing.
May I have a motion and a second to approve the proposed plans and specifications for the Oak Park Exterior Masonry Project?
So moved.
We have a motion from Langford and a second from Natasha Newcomb. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, please vote. Motion passes 7-0. And now we will get to the last public hearing for the evening. Item number E7, Weeks Elementary School Exterior Masonry Restoration Project. Is there anyone wishing to speak to this item? Hearing no one, I will close the public hearing and ask the superintendent to please introduce the matter.
I recommend the board review and approve the plans and specifications prepared for the exterior masonry restoration project at Weeks Middle School following the public hearing.
May I have a motion and a second to approve the proposed plans and specification for the Weeks Exterior Masonry Project?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Ellsburn and a second from Anderson. Any board questions or comments? Hearing none, please vote. Item passes 7-0. The next item on our agenda is item number F1, the Elementary Literacy Monitoring Report. I'll turn it over to Dr. Ahart for the introduction of the matter and then presentation.
Okay, so this is a part one of the early literacy monitoring process, so there will not be a vote on this evening. Part two will come in June. I would also note that we intended to give this monitoring report earlier in the board calendar, but because of some data issues from the Department of Education, we were not able to get all of the data that we needed for the originally planned presentation. So this is a rescheduled first report for the early literacy monitoring. And with that, I will turn things over to our super smart team of leaders. And I guess, Noelle, do you want to kick it off?
Take it off. All right. Thank you, board, for allowing us to come and discuss some fall data with you. I know we have some new board members with us, so I do want to set a little bit of context for how we view this data tonight. So overall, when we look at the data, or I'm sure you've had a chance to view the data, what we're really pleased with is we're confident in saying that overall we see some real system improvement. So when we look at trend, in this case over 3 years, we're looking at improvements across almost every single subgroup pretty consistently across almost every single grade level. So that tells us with confidence that we are getting better, simply. So that's due to a lot of hard work happening in our schools every day, a lot of hard work happening with our boots on the ground directors from Office of Schools, partnering with our early literacy leadership team. That's a joint effort between academics and our Heartland partners. So to give you some background, the early literacy implementation from the state level called ELI, that started in 14 and 15. And so those kindergartners at that time are now in 3rd grade. So we're able to really start to see the impact of that system, which includes increased monitoring, progress monitoring, and targeted intervention for students not meeting benchmark. I will also say that this is this data set was our first trial run for our new problem-solving process that's been developed with our data and assessment team, and we got to kind of trial run our equity framework. So this data, we took through that process and had a really good discussion and deep dive into it for the first time. So our key performance indicators for this report are % of students at or above fall to spring benchmark on FAST assessment, looking K3, % of students meeting or exceeding our MAP on track for college and career readiness benchmark in reading grades 2 and 3. So for the MAP, this is the first year now we'll actually have cohort data, which is meaning that we can look at last year's students compared to those same students in 3rd grade. So we'll talk more about that when we get to that point. So to set some context for the FAST data, this is a screener. And so what's important to know about a screening is that it's designed to over-identify students. So we want to know who in our system is at risk for not being on track for grade level by 3rd grade. So it is designed to over-identify students. That's important to keep in mind. And then the benchmark changes throughout the year. So when we assess in the fall, in order to meet benchmark, students have to meet a certain cut point. That cut point changes for winter. So if we say a student met benchmark in the winter, they have to grow just to keep up. So the more we get students meeting benchmark, that means we're closing some gaps. And then in the spring, it changes again. So we want to see those kids grow to maintain, if that makes sense. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Liz Grizzle, our elementary literacy coordinator, and she's going to walk you through some additional data beyond what was included in your report and kind of our synthesis of that.
So we'll kind of walk through the 4 grade levels, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, to see some big trends and implications for each one. So kindergarten, and I know we talked a little bit about this last year, but it's kind of just incoming data, not necessarily reflective of the system, but just identifying the needs of the kids first coming to us. So you can see it looks very similar as it did in the past, with a little bit of fluctuation up in most subgroups, but not significant percentages increase or decrease too much in any of those subgroup data. And then we have a 70% projection for spring meeting benchmark for these kindergartners. Particularly, we wanted to hone in on some preschool data, and I know we've talked a little bit about this before as well. So this particular data set shows of every student, every kindergartner who met benchmark, the blue friends attended a DMPS preschool. So you can see the impact of that in every subgroup. Again, if they attended preschool, they were more likely to meet benchmark there. So kind of some big picture notable trends, again, from kindergarten, that preschool really matters. It made a significant difference if you're looking at that African-American subgroup particularly. And then again, that this is really just a starting place, a place to identify which students are at risk and for us to identify who we need to target with support, but not really giving us a whole lot of information about how well our system is supporting the students. And then first grade gives us a little bit more information because these students, most of them have been with us for kindergarten. So again, as Noelle mentioned, almost every subgroup here, we see gains, particularly in our special education, African American, and Hispanic subgroups, some notable gains there. And then our white subpopulation has a small decrease as well, with, again, a 60% meeting benchmark projection for spring. So again, some big picture notable trends, significant improvement for most subgroups, namely Hispanic, African American, and special education subgroups. And then again, that white subgroup saw a slight decrease. So those were kind of some big takeaways for us. And then second grade, as Noelle mentioned, those students were with us that very first year of early literacy implementation. They would have been in first grade, so they have had 2 years of that. First grade, nope, they would have been in kindergarten. So they have been with us for 3 years. Their whole career in DMPS has had this early literacy implementation. So we're seeing some big gains with that group in all our subgroups. So very exciting. 3 of our subgroups, particularly our free and reduced lunch, African American, Asian, and also Hispanic, 9% or more increase. And again, this is trend data, so we're looking at different kids year over year, but showing us that our system is really serving kids more effectively. So closing gaps for all those subgroups there. And again, the projection for spring, 55% there. So again, just those big picture trends, every subgroup seeing achievement gains, and significant gains in the 4 subgroups, but across the board, really all gains for across those 3 years. So, and then third grade, again, these students would have been kindergartners during when we first implemented the ELI implementation. So we've got, again, gains across all of our subpopulations there. Significant gains in our free and reduced lunch, Asian, Hispanic, and multiracial. The smallest gain there is with our ELL group, and our ELL team has re-examined kind of the structure that they use to provide support, trying to target to those kids who need the most support. So they've already looked at that data with some other metrics and have some conversations about some changes that they'll make there. But again, across the board, some significant gains pointing to some system effectiveness. And so, again, the most significant improvements, Asian, Hispanic, multiracial, and free and reduced lunch subgroups. And Carlene's gonna talk us through how DMPS compares statewide.
We just wanted to share a little bit of context about the improvements of this data. So if you take a look, you can see on that slide that this is looking at last year's data. So we're looking from fall to spring last year. We didn't have access to the Heartland or state data when we reported in July. So we wanted to bring that context. And you can see that from fall to spring, the amount of gains that we made in students meeting the benchmark was 5.7%. And across Heartland, all of the districts there made 3%, and the state made 2.9%. So we almost doubled the amount of growth that the state experienced. And in fact, 40% of the districts within the state had zero or negative growth over that time last year. So it really puts into context the hard work that has been accomplished by the schools in Des Moines and really making some astounding gains for our students. So, and if you look on the next slide, you can see this is a comparison of urban across the state, and you can again see how significant the growth that Des Moines has been making with a system-wide approach that they've been in responding to our students' needs. It's not easy to move that because the bar keeps changing all year, and so you really have to have a pretty accelerated learning going on for your students. Then we'll take a quick look at the MAP data in regard to the cohort. So we were able to look at second graders and then the percent that were meeting the college and career readiness benchmark in third grade. An important thing to keep in mind is these are not necessarily the same students. And I think the best example that we can share with you is in ELL. You can see at second grade, there were 10% meeting the college and career ready benchmark, and there were less, but this fall, but those students that were getting ELL services but meeting the college and career readiness benchmark have been exited out of ELL. So it's important to keep a little bit of context around the data in that sense. So it's not a matched cohort in the sense that, yes, it's all of our second graders last year and all of our third graders this year, but not necessarily every single student's matched up in that. So. And with that, I think we'll turn it over for discussion.
Questions or comments from the board? Yes, Ms. Langford.
Excuse me, I have a little bit of a scratch in my throat today, so bear with me. Well, for starters, it's really good to see that like our students who have been, transitioning through this program over the last few years, we're seeing the effects of that, the positive effects of that, so that's really encouraging. I had just a few questions. The first one is around the benchmarks that are being set. And so I noticed, especially when we're seeing such like improvements among some of our subgroups, why do we set the meeting benchmark? Why does that decrease with each? And so like in kindergarten, we set that 70% of students would meet the benchmark in kindergarten. And then first grade, 60% of those students would meet the benchmark. And then second grade, where we saw a lot, like the most growth happen, 55%. So I'm just trying to understand how we're setting these standards.
Oh, go ahead.
So those are those mirror the state trend.
Yeah.
So when we look at overall, because keep in mind after first grade, it switches from only assessing foundational literacy into assessing full reading skills. And so the state, that mirrors the trend that we see across the state with the percent of students expected to meet benchmark. And so our trends are consistent with the statewide trend.
Break that down for me one more time, Noelle. So
The assessment is different from first grade into second and third grade. And so what we see across the entire state of Iowa is from year to year, fewer kids meet benchmark, even though that's kind of counterintuitive. So our goals or our expected projections mirror the state trend that we see in most districts across Iowa.
Okay. Thank you. And
I don't know if
then-
that answers your question.
Yeah, it answers.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then I was wondering, we are seeing the dramatic differences that students who have gone through a preschool program, particularly our preschool programs, are seeing coming into kindergarten. The political context that we're in, it doesn't seem like we're going to get preschool funding is being cut across our state. And so I'm just wondering what that looks like in our district, knowing the realities of the really tight financial situation where schools are being placed in. Is there a place? How do we remedy some of that? And this is just like a discussion, but like, what does that look like? We know that that reality isn't going to change in the foreseeable future for our students. And so I guess I'm wondering, what can we do with what we have?
In terms of offering more preschool?
Yeah, or addressing those gaps, or...
Well, so addressing the gaps, and we've talked about this before, but it might bear repeating, are targeted and intensive support teams that we have in identified schools. We have a group of schools that have particular challenges that are receiving really intensive support, and then another group of schools that are receiving what we call targeted support. To identify, it's really identifying the schools who tend to have the population that comes to us with the most challenges. We haven't correlated that directly to preschool attendance and not, but it seems pretty intuitive that that's where the bigger challenges are, because the data certainly bears that out. Without identifying another funding stream, I really don't know. I've thought about this a lot. I don't know how we really provide more opportunities for students to partake of our preschool program. We're doing a pretty miraculous job of serving a lot of kids with the limited funds that we have, and we've stretched that about as thin as we can and not sacrifice quality of service and outcomes. So Susie, you had something to add?
And just to add to that, one of the things that Susie Guest and her team does really well is they're always going back and working with business and finance in regard to different funding streams. And sometimes that provides us an opportunity to braid funding where we can make some adjustments. Over the past couple years, we haven't had as much of a chance to do that, but based on some shifts to funding through our Shared Visions program, we might be able to capitalize on that and do some braiding of funds in order to, right now it's a full day program, but we might be required to make it 2 half-day, and by doing that, we would have an opportunity to capture more preschool students. So that's something we're just exploring right now, but really it's that's as much flexibility that we have to be able to do, things like that without additional funding.
Absolutely. I may just take a moment of privilege to highlight to our community that with the current funding that we have available for preschool, it could be an opportunity for you all to get more involved with your school board and school district this winter as we go up on the Hill and begin to advocate for our legislative priorities, which include increase in funding for our preschool students. So stay tuned for that. And then my final question, do we know what's happening? Because we saw there are some pretty huge gains in that second grade year. And is there anything we can specifically look at or point to that we know is being successful or that's working there?
Our hypothesis is a stronger foundation in kindergarten and first grade.
Okay.
And so as we started putting a huge spotlight on it at the beginning of this work, every year that those students go through the system, they're better readers. And so we think that the fruits of the labor that we're seeing in second and third are a result of high quality things happening in K-1. Not to take anything away from our second and third grade teachers, but it really, more students are coming to them better prepared.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Other board questions or comments? Ms. Newcomb?
And I know we've been through this already, so I'm just trying to wrap my brain around a little bit on the kindergarten slide 7, and then the visual here in the additional information that we were provided with the graph and everything. And again, I know we discussed this, last year as well, looking at the numbers. Could we go into that just a little bit? Because particularly like for our African American students, we see, 43%, then it jumps to 48 and then 40. I know there's a trend and overall, average between the 3 years kind of gives one story, but looking at the breakdown per year is a different story. You just kind of see the numbers go up and then back down. I mean, can we, I don't know.
Specifically kindergarten, is that?
Yeah, it's slide 7, specifically the kindergarten FAST assessment, table 2 on the additional information that was provided. It's not in the slides.
Nope, that's okay. And I think
Yeah.
kindergarten fall data really represents the kiddos that are coming to us. So unless they've had preschool, we don't have a whole lot of impact on that data because they take the test within a month and a half of getting to us. So that fall data doesn't tell us a whole lot about the system other than the same type of needs are coming to us year after year. But I don't know about the dips in terms of why it would change from year
Something
to
like that
year.
would happen. Okay. I do have just a quick follow-up. I apologize. No, okay. For that particular slide, we have 70%, and I didn't do the math or anything like that, taking into consideration particularly the students that don't have preschool. With that 70%, are we including that, considering we see such a gap?
Right, so that projection would be for spring. And so what we're projecting is by spring, we want to have all students, regardless of their preschool attendance, we want 70% hitting benchmark, the kindergarten benchmark in the spring. It's lofty, but we think we can do it.
Those are my questions.
Ms. De La Gardelle Shelley?
Yeah, in looking at slide number 8, where the kindergartners who met the benchmark in preschool participation, this is when they walk through the doors, correct? In the fall, this is the fall data on slide 8?
Correct.
Okay. So if I'm reading this right, then roughly 70% of our students who attended the DMPS preschool walk through the door meeting benchmark in the fall.
So I'm going to word that because there's 2 ways to look at the data and it can be confusing. So this is of the students who met the benchmark. So
Okay.
all the students included in this
Okay,
data set
okay,
met the benchmark.
okay.
What percent attended preschool and what percent did not attend, DMPS preschool and what percent did not. So
Okay.
another way to look at this is, I'm assuming the way that you approached it, which is what percent have met benchmark and didn't meet benchmark. And that's data that we've requested from our assessment team, and we should have that by Monday. So if that's something
Okay.
the board is interested in, I know it was in the preschool report as
Okay.
well.
So then, on that flip side, if I'm reading the data that way, do we have students who come to us who neither of those two is true? Like, they did not attend a DMPS preschool, but they did attend another preschool. Are they accounted for in this data at all? Because in looking at this, and I add those numbers together, there aren't, but there would have to be some students that would fall in that category, correct?
So our data and assessment team took out students who may have attended a different preschool.
Okay.
That we had record of them attending, but it wasn't a DMPS preschool.
Okay. So the full picture is then, and maybe this is in the other part and I'm just totally missing it. And I might just be having trouble reading the graphs again. So on the table 2 then that Natasha was talking about, is that then where I'm finding the number of students who met the fall benchmark walking in the door?
Yeah, that would have been 52.15% of kindergartners met the benchmark.
And that's, we're not accounting for any type of preschool, we're just.
Correct.
So it's really a coin toss then for our kids.
Correct.
Like when they walk through the door, it's sort of a coin toss that this one might not.
So that's the additional data that we've requested
Okay.
to look at table 2 from a preschool participation standpoint. Because I think that's that's the piece that you're wondering about. We asked the same question, and so
Okay.
that's the data that we
Okay.
would be happy to come back with.
Would we be able to see that, and maybe not on Monday, but would we be able to see that then compared to some of that other, like the UEN cohort data and just on the state? Is that even available? Only because I'm just curious, there are different factors in Des Moines that impact our students here. And I
don't think they do.
is that a no, is that a yes, or?
I doubt we would be able to do that
Okay.
in a clean enough way that it
In a
would
clean
be
enough way that would.
accurate. Yeah.
Okay, well, only because I think that also helps to feed into our argument of why our kids, particularly in Des Moines, need that preschool
Sure,
experience
yeah.
so much. And that was what I was just curious of. Like, if it's a coin toss for our kids,
Right.
is it a 75% chance they're gonna meet benchmark in the fall if they're in a different place in our state? Because I think that would help to enrich an argument. So if that would be data that we could track down, I don't think it is, but if it is, that might be helpful.
And just, the only reason that I mentioned that is because last year, our last legislative session, when we were trying to look for similar data to do that exact thing, so many districts do not keep track of things the same way, or, so it's to have a comparison, but.
Anything else?
No, I just want to always make sure I'm understanding your charts and graphs because I know how much time you put into them. So thank you. And thank you again to your team for the hard work that you have been doing and for all of your teachers and their hard work. So
Thank you.
Other board questions or comments? Hearing none, yes. No problem.
Around your ELL work, you mentioned that you guys were re-evaluated. Could you just enlighten us a little bit as to what that looks like?
So right now, we are in the process of re-examining our service model. And so what our goal is to move away from a pull-out model where we pull ELL students out of our, oh, look who showed up. Pablo, I'll let you speak to this. Great.
She pretty much hit the nail on the head. We're trying to focus less on pull-out for students that don't require it, that have a higher level of language acquisition. We'd want them to be in a mainstream classroom as much as possible. And when we do decide, or when we do pull students out into smaller groups, it's because they're lower on the language acquisition continuum.
Okay. So pulling students out of mainstream classes less is what you're looking at doing, and that'll have hopefully a solid impact on the data.
That's what we're hoping for.
Awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
sorry, Pablo, can I grab you for a second? When you're talking about the continuum, that's the 1 through 6 scale, right? The 6 is where our students are being exited. So is there a 0, or is that our 1s and 2s? I would like to see, I would just like some idea of where on that scale we're thinking about we're pulling kids.
So we've broken it out into 3 major categories. There's the emergent students. Those would be our lowest students in terms of language acquisition. Either they've recently arrived to the country or have never had exposure to the English language. And there are kids that fall under the progressing continuum. Lower progressing means you probably need a little more pull-out. Kids that fall on higher progressing or proficient, we'd expect that they would be in a mainstream classroom the majority of the time.
Thank you.
Of course.
Anyone else? I did have just one quick follow-up to the preschool data. I want to make sure I'm clear on this. So when you say DMPS preschool students, those are the ones that actually attended preschool in one of our buildings, not those that attended preschool in one of the other funded programs by the district. Is that correct?
Yes, so it'd be the four like Taylor, Mitchell, and then the few sites that are within like Capitol View, and then the partner sites are not included in the data.
Why would we not include the partner sites?
Since we don't control that curriculum.
Yeah, you do. We all are doing the same thing. We're all doing gold. We all have certified teachers. It's the same platform. It's my understanding.
And they're welcome to participate in our professional development and training, but many times they provide their own. And so when Mary referenced they have their own curriculum that they're using or resources to support students, it might not be exactly the same things that we're using, and their professional development sometimes would align with what we're doing, but sometimes it may not, depending on what they focus on.
Okay. I would just offer that I do think that it would be critically important, especially if we really want to talk holistically about the implications of funding relative to preschool, because there are a number of students that are being served in other than DMPS buildings and funded programs. So if there's a way to qualify that or quantify that as part of the data, they're all certified teachers. I think that's great quality. I'm part of that program. And I do think that the more we draw distinctions about where kids are being served, even if it is under the same umbrella with the same funding, I think we begin to compare and contrast in ways that may or may not be representative of what's actually happening.
I would just like to make a request for information on preschool, that who would be the best person for me to follow up with if I wanted to sit down and talk about preschool, because I think this just opened a whole bunch of questions for me that I don't think right now is the best time to do that. So who, Tom,
Susie
who should I follow
Guest.
up with? Who?
Susie Guest.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
I just have one.
Additional questions, yes.
Is the Montessori preschool included in this data? Because, I mean, their curriculum and methods are different than,
Yes, they would be considered DMPS.
but they're using different materials and methods, so.
Yeah, and in some ways, align with the work that we're doing, but, holding true to Montessori as well, that there are some things that are a little different or unique.
Okay, just wondered. Thanks.
Additional board questions or comments? We will not be voting on this tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is item number F2, school start times. Before turning it over to the superintendent to introduce the matter and for the presentation, I want to just make sure that there's clarity around tonight's discussion on bell times. There will be no action on this item this evening. The board will receive the staff report and the results of the survey, as well as receive any public comment. And I do believe we have individuals signed to speak this evening. Following the presentation and the comments, the board will set aside time for itself to have a policy discussion regarding its role in either establishing, modifying, or approving bell times so that we can be clear with the superintendent about the next steps that need to be taken. But there will be no formal action taken by the board this evening. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Ahart.
All right, so because of interest in the community and particularly interest by the board in exploring changing the start times for our schools in response to what is a growing body of research that we think would allow us to, without utilizing more resources, which aren't available anyway, to better and more effectively and more equitably serve our students. We've been working on a way to essentially flip start times so that our secondary schools, middles and high schools, start later in the day, and that our elementary schools then would start earlier in the day. And as many of you recall, we put a proposal together last year in April, brought it to the board for discussion, and we're asked to go back and see if we could tweak it a bit to cover some of the challenges that that initial proposal raised. And so we have done just that. And so we have a team here tonight to share what we are now calling the Platinum Plan, as opposed to the Gold Plan. And we think it accomplishes what we want to accomplish from a research perspective, and also addresses most of the needs that comment last year indicated were not met in the April plan of 2017. So with that, I'll turn things over to Tim, Susie, and Shelley.
Thanks, Tom. Well, we're back, and we are very excited to be here to share this update with you. This presentation is titled Improving School Hours on Purpose, because with the team effort, we are very confident that we've got a plan here that will improve outcomes for students based on when we have them go to school. The agenda for the presentation is 5 points, actually. We'll revisit the research. We'll share survey data around the Platinum plan. I was hoping to be the first person to say Platinum, but
sorry, still your thunder.
Tom beat me to it. We're going to share the positive trends and any stakeholder concerns that came from this last round of surveying. We'll share our response to the data and our plan. And lastly, which isn't on the slide, is like always, we'll take questions and comments from you. Anyone seen this video? Anyone seen this man? Yes. So the case for change was very important because this proposal changes the reality, the status quo for every single family and every single student in our district. So in an effort to have that case for change be very consistent, Tom created a video that's been viewed by several thousand people, including all of you. We're not going to play it tonight. I'm going to spare you that, but there's a couple key pieces here.
We obviously have no makeup budget.
Right. A couple key pieces. The key takeaway here is that we're currently structurally contributing to sleep deprivation of our adolescent students in particular. And the case for change points that out very thoroughly. And I'll share a little bit of the why. This is not new information for you. You've all known this, but I'm going to just summarize it briefly again. The research around the health and academic benefits for adolescents in particular, if they are attending school at the time when they're awake, when their body is saying, yep, I'm here, I'm ready to do this thing, is compelling. It's very strong, it's rich, it's deep, unlike 11 years ago, quite frankly, when we came with a much shallower research base. Right now, it's extremely compelling that adolescents should not start school before 8:30 or thereabouts. Organizations, national organizations are literally pleading with us in K-12 education to make this change. Everyone from the Pediatrics Association, the Psychology Association, the Sleep Foundation folks, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the American Medical Association, all of these folks have written position papers essentially pleading with K-12 education to make this structural change to help adolescents learn. They've done this in a very unified way because the data, quite frankly, is compelling and it's consistent. We can do this, we can make this change, and we're going to tell you here in a couple minutes how and why. So a couple of the key benefits. Again, you know all of this, so I'm just going to be brief. The benefits to students we've grouped into sort of 3 categories. The first is learning outcomes, and we know that research indicates we can improve attendance, first period grades. We can also improve standardized assessments by having kids go to school when they're ready to learn. Then in the middle column there, we know there are health and well-being benefits for students also, decreases in obesity, depression, improvements in impulse control, dramatic reductions actually in drowsy driving statistics for morning high school drivers, and at-risk behaviors in general, all are health and well-being aspects. For us in Des Moines, the third category is really quite important for us, and there's research to support this as well, and that is there's disproportionate impact, negative impact on our least socioeconomically advantaged students. Meaning, put differently, our current system is most detrimental to those students who are already disadvantaged socioeconomically. There's national research about that, but let me just share a couple stats about Des Moines Public Schools. In the last 2 2 years, our middle school and high school students who qualify for free and reduced lunch are 2 to 3 times more likely to be absent first period. Being absent first period means they probably didn't get breakfast. It also correlates to their grades. So that same group of students achieve a grade of A through C at 7 to 14% lower than their non-free and reduced qualifying peers. And that's right here, our own students, our own data. Additionally, our free and reduced qualifying students and our ELL students in particular are most reliant on transportation that we provide. They're most reliant on public transportation, they're most reliant on yellow bus transportation, and so we've taken this disproportionate impact on them, the negative disproportionate impact on them, and then said, now get to a bus stop even earlier than some of your less disadvantaged peers. So we've contributed to this even in terms of when we have students come to school in that category. So that third section to the right is really important from us in DMPS as we're trying to really crush the inequities in our system. Shelley?
So we know that there's no question that the body of evidence is clear and that there are additional studies being added all of the time. We know that a change in school hours and aligning them more closely with student sleep patterns will be of benefit for our students in terms of health and well-being and their academic success. We knew this 11 years ago when we presented it for the first time. And in fact, there was a great deal of support for changing school hours at that time. What stood in our way at that time was finding a cost-neutral plan so that we could make an adjustment in the school hours. So we're very excited tonight, as Tim said, because we now have a cost-neutral plan that we want to share with you. So if we look at school hours, and we focus on the top tier there, the blue, that's our current schedule. We knew that in addition to answering the demands of the research, we also wanted, we also wanted all of the elementary to be on one tier. We wanted this because it helped with professional development and collaboration and sharing of resources. So last year, a proposal was brought forth, and we were closer to meeting our goal, but Ruby Van Meter and Smouse were in a separate tier. So what we're sharing with you tonight is the Platinum Plan, as Tom said, and it will be the focus of our presentation. You'll see that there are two differences from last year's plan to the Platinum Plan, and that is that Ruby and Smouse are now within the tiers for their level, and that elementaries start 15 minutes earlier. So this plan has been communicated far and wide. There was a very aggressive communication plan that was developed and implemented. We very specifically targeted groups to ensure that all voices were heard. You'll see that the ELL department held community meetings, and in fact, they had over 300 participants at those meetings. 65 of our community partners participated in a citywide community partnership forum, and the ask during that forum was that they help to get the word out to people and that they help us to identify any barriers and remediate those barriers. Tim and Susie both met with their principal advisory groups, and in fact there was an all-principal meeting that was held where this plan was shared and questions were answered at that time. DMEA and AFSCME leadership have both been involved, and there were meetings with their leadership. There was media coverage, and Phil's team did a fantastic job of getting the word out through our website, also Facebook and Twitter accounts. And I'm sure you've seen some of the articles in the Des Moines Register, including the one this morning in the editorial, where they were very much in support of making the change. In addition to all of that, We had surveys that went out, and I want to talk a little bit more about those surveys. So if we look a little deeper at those surveys, they were online and paper. So we have responses from 6,332 people in those surveys, and you can see they're broken down by parent, student, staff, and community. In addition to the online survey, we also offered a paper survey, and in fact, we had 438 paper surveys that were counted within this total in 7 different languages. So over 10% of the parents' responses were from ELL parents. There were 5 parts to the survey. There was a ranking of factors when considering the schedule. There was a reaction to the positive impact, a reaction to the negative impact, and then the overall impact response, and then an area where comments were requested. Susie's going to talk a little bit more about the results of the survey.
Okay. In the next slide, what you're looking at is just the overall picture of responses in regard to participation and also in regard to support for the plan compared last year to this year's. So when we're looking at what impact would the change in start times have on individuals and their families, you can see overall consistently we have had positive feedback for stakeholders supporting this change. We had that positive feedback last year, and again, you can see with the responses that we received, same positive feedback, over 50% of our stakeholders wanting to see a change in our current structure. Now over to the far left just gives you an idea of the number of individuals that did take the survey over to the far right. So there's a slight decline in regard to the positive support, but again, very slight, and over 50% of our families. This year it was 53.47%. Then if you take a look on the next slide, we're breaking down each stakeholder group, and so you can see what the overall positive impact is for staff, community, all parents, ELL parents, as well as students. Really, there might have been a slight, variation in the percent, maybe 2%, 3% for each stakeholder group in comparison to last year. The one that you notice had a significant decrease actually was our community, but the reason for that is we had a very small number actually take the survey this time. In fact, it was probably about half of what we had last year, which contributed to the percent giving feedback as far as positive impact of the Platinum Plan. If you take a look at the highest rated positive impact feedback provided on the survey, interestingly, these are all the same ones that were identified last year. However, there's one thing I would like to point out. When you take a look at improving academic performance, last year, that was ranked a little bit lower, but based on the feedback we collected from the Platinum Plan, you'll see that that was actually something that moved up to number 2 as far as its rating, and so stakeholders seeing the impact and the improvement that this could make for students in regard to academics, but again, our top 5 are over 55% positive. When taking a look at the highest rated negative impact, again, these are the same as last year when we collected feedback on the survey. All 3 came out to be the top 3. Here's the interesting thing. When you take a look at creating problems with childcare, there was actually a significant reduction in that. Last year, it was 60% of individuals had rated it as having a negative impact, but based on the proposed plan, seeing that actually that is something with childcare that went down as far as being a negative. Themes and comments that we were provided through the survey and also on the district website are the same as the feedback that we collected last year. Positives overall, stakeholders like that it's research driven. They like that students are going to be coming to school even more prepared, that it supports sleep patterns, There's less unsupervised time. That in particular is for secondary students, that after school time. And that we're making decisions that are in the best interest of students. When you take a look at concerns, these are the same as last time. Elementary start time too early, limits student work schedules, and limits extracurricular activities. I think what I would know on the concern side, limiting the work schedules and extracurricular activities really comes down to individual students. Some it may impact, some it may not impact, just based on looking at the feedback. And in regard to the elementary early start time, that was the common theme I think that we were able to identify in the survey feedback. Obviously, you see this time Ruby, Van Meter, and Smouse aren't on the concerns list because we listened to the feedback and we addressed those concerns in this new plan. In summary, this proposal impacts every single student, every parent, every staff member, and our entire community. But yet, when you take a look at the results, you'll see that there's still strong support for changing bell times. We still have over 50% of our stakeholders supporting this change last year and supporting this change again this year. They've had 2 opportunities of providing feedback. We've also, as you saw in the results, that they've prioritized, they like the students first aspect, and just a high level of positive response in regard to addressing the health and academic needs of students, prioritizing that, seeing that that's important. And I think, we have a real opportunity here to continue to do something that can result in better outcomes for students that will not cost additional money. It's not going to require additional resources. We can take what we have existing right now and do something to help improve the outcomes for students, academically and for their well-being as well. Communication and feedback has been thorough. We've provided numerous avenues for all of our stakeholder groups to provide feedback, also provide communication and get input. And I think one of the great things about the timing of all of this is we are giving families an opportunity to prepare and to be thinking about this if in fact this change were to occur and take place. Lastly, it's really relatively a small percent of concern among our stakeholder groups. We did identify, elementary start time as a common theme that was lifted up. But one of the things that I can say is what we do and what we do really well is we listen to our community and we take their feedback and we take their input and we respond to that. So you will see in the next couple slides what our response will be to those concerns. Currently, we have a safe route protocol. I bet you didn't know that, but we do. And we have this for our elementary students, and we also have it for our secondary students. So we're going to have an opportunity to already take a protocol that we have in place, make it more robust, and that we can add that to our curriculum. We do teach safety to students, and we have an opportunity to build that right into it based on some of the changes. And the great thing about that is we can impact every single student in our district by doing that, and we can guarantee that that absolutely can happen. We also work directly with the City of Des Moines Police and traffic departments in regard to any issues that arise, and we will continue to build on that partnership and capitalize on that and absolutely continue to do that moving forward if this is in fact a change that occurs. One of the other things we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to leverage our department, our Culture, Climate, and Community Department with some existing staff that we already have, and we're going to maximize their scope of work in order to leverage these positions to actually be able to go out into the community and help support this change with students. We can work with our Metro Care workers, volunteers, community partners, faith-based organizations, and AmeriCorps staff to support walking routes to school, walking school buses, being out there where our bus stops are, within reason, what we are able to, in our scope of work, able to do. And we've already been working with Allison Vukovic and her team in regard to this and getting plans in motion. We also anticipate that there could be, a positive financial impact for families. Right now, we serve 1,363 students in Metro Care in the morning program, and by starting earlier in the morning, we would have an opportunity to capture those students earlier, and it may not require parents to have morning supervision. I think sometimes if you drive by in the morning, you'll also see students waiting outside of the school doors. We're going to be able to get those students right away and bring them into school. One of the things that we've done this year that's been absolutely fantastic for our families and for our kids is we've offered breakfast in the classroom. So we already have that up and running in every single building. So students arrive early. We have an opportunity to capitalize on getting them a breakfast in the morning and also going straight to class. Teachers will have an additional 15 to 20 minutes, which they have right now to capture for academic, building relationships, following up with students, making sure that, that they, any additional help, support, they have a variety of different ways that they use that time and maximize that time with children. And just this past month alone, we have been able to, in 1 month, have 34,000 more breakfasts served to students. So you think about how many more children we could impact by making this change. We know students are going to also need supervision at the end of the day, and we are prepared to expand child care services in the afternoon to have a more diverse program of care for students. We were prepared to do that last year in the fall, and we're prepared to do that moving forward as well. And again, that's something we've been working with our Culture, Climate, and Community Department. I would also like to add there are 2 other benefits to this on the elementary side of things. After school issues with secondary students, we're looking forward to that is not an issue for us at the elementary level if this change takes place. I just had received communication from a principal not long ago, a lot of different issues going on that she was having to manage after the school day because we had some middle school and high school students across the street and causing a little bit of a disruption. That takes time, and it also would help eliminate things like that. The other thing, we're excited at the elementary level about the opportunities that this provides for teachers in regard to training and collaboration time. By getting out a little bit earlier at the end of the day, how could we maximize that time with staff and use it to their benefit? Because that's something we're always trying to capture more of at the elementary level. And that would hold true for students too. Beyond Metro Care, we also have like 21st Century program and have an opportunity to really do some more things at the building level and hopefully serve some more students as well.
It's me.
I thought so.
It can be me. It can be me. I know what this says. So this is a repeat of the overview. The evidence is compelling. It's compelling, it's rich, it's deep, it's thorough, and literally all major organizations that care about youth are saying this is what you need to be doing, K-12. We know there's better academic results and health improvements for students. We know that we've tried this once and we're wiser and we have more resources to bring to bear now, and we can do it in a cost neutral way that doesn't require staff or additional funds. Shelley, is this you or is it me? Ah, it's you, okay.
Okay, so just a reminder of our timeline. So the week of October 23rd, departments and principals presented the case for change. And so that went out to every administrator, and then each administrator gave that case for change to their department so that they were well aware of the plan and the reason behind the plan. The media campaign began at that time, and like I said, you saw, I know Phil had the numbers of thousands of tweets and posts and different kinds of things that he had put out there in the media. The week of November 7th through the 16th was when the surveys were out, and we sought input from our community, our parents, students, staff, and community members around the Platinum proposal that you heard about tonight. And then that brings us to this evening, the 21st, and the presentation with you.
Great.
Questions or comments?
So I'd like to maybe go to public comment. I failed to do this before the presentation, so I apologize to individuals in the public who are here wanting to address this issue. I have groupings of individuals who have signed to speak. So the first group is comprised of Judy Dorr, Tina Edwards, and Bobby Joe Pullman. You could please come forward and state your names again and addresses for the record.
I'm Judy Dorr, and I live at 1317 Caden Trail in Bondurant, Iowa.
Tina Edwards, 3101 East Tippin Avenue in Des Moines.
Bobby Joe Pullman, 708 East Seneca Avenue in Des Moines.
And we are all teachers at Ruby Van Meter School. And we certainly want to let you know that we are really excited with this new proposal.
Your platinum plan.
With the platinum plan, right.
We like platinum.
Right. And our students at Ruby Van Meter, this will really fit them very well. It goes with the research that you've talked about with their sleep. Our students are adolescents. They're all the way up to young adults. And this will really help with their sleep patterns the same way. And we just think this is a win for everybody in the district, not just our school, but all the students in the district. And we do thank you for going back and looking at it again. We really appreciate that.
Definitely, thank you. Thank you for, tabling it last time and for having more discussion and more research and everything on it, because it means so much to us and we appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next individuals that I have signed are Cindy Whites and Roxanne Cummings.
Hi, Cynthia Weiss, principal at Ruby Van Meter School, 8332 Northwest Street, Ankeny.
Roxanne Cummings, principal at Smouse Opportunity School, 1209 Northwest Campus Drive, Ankeny.
We, along with several of our staff members, would like to express our support for the proposal for improving school hours that was discussed tonight. As you know, our school community expressed some concern with the proposal brought forward last year. We want to be clear that the concern was in having Ruby Van Meter and Smouse on a separate tier, along with its implications for programming. We are very much in support of the change in school hours as written in the current proposal. We are pleased with this proposal. It is not only a better fit for our special school students, but it also allows the district to present a schedule district-wide that is in keeping with research. The current proposal is a win for students across the district. We would like to express our deep appreciation for your consideration of the needs of all students. Your willingness to come back to the table this school year with a proposal that benefits all students is a testament to the compassion and perseverance of our district leaders. So thank you.
As special school principals, and on behalf of the students and families we serve at Smouse and Ruby, we're just wanting to reiterate that we're very much in support of the current Improving School Hours Platinum proposal, as we believe that the schedule presented in this proposal taps optimal learning time for our students. It allows us to instruct students earlier in the day when they're focused and they're ready to learn. It also allows us to end the school day in mid-afternoon, which is the time of the day when our students are more tired, they're less focused, and frankly, they're ready for the day to be over. As an indicator of the support of the administrators, Cindy and I, the teachers, and the support staff at both Smouse and Ruby Van Meter, we have submitted to Dr. Ahart, and he in turn, I'm sure, has submitted to the board signatures of 120 staff members on our shared campus who would like to also assert their support of this new plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Lois Brass. Oh, okay, great. And Mary Menard.
I'm Lois Brass. I live at 3823 Southwest 31st Street in Des Moines, and I am the principal at McKinley Elementary School.
And I'm Mary Menard, 4019 45th Street in Des Moines, and I'm the principal at Jefferson Elementary.
And we are here representing the south side, we've decided, but because that's where we work. But representing elementary principals and in support of the Platinum Plan. I think they named it after my hair. We hear a lot about the sleep needs of adolescents, but we are also here to tell you that this plan will also be beneficial for elementary students. Currently, I think Susie already said it, but at my school, we have a lot of kids who are at school early, as much as 45 minutes before we open the doors, which is currently at 8 o'clock. Why wouldn't we have the doors open for them so they can come in and get breakfast right away and get their day started? It seems to me that some of the opposition to changing the school hours has more to do with adult convenience than what is best for our kids. So I would urge you to do what's best for our students and support this proposal.
And I am actually coming at this from teacher and parent and principal standpoint. I've been with the district for 28 years. I taught kindergarten for 19 of those years. And what I know, as much as we talk about the adolescents and how this is good for them, what we also need to remember is that our younger kids who are up at the crack of dawn and ready to learn need to be able to come into our schools. And what I also know as a principal is every year when we build our schedule for learning, what we are actually doing, our K-2 teachers are fighting to make sure that we have their literacy block in the morning, because what we know about our younger kids is that 9 to 11 time for them to be able to do the foundational literacy skills and take care of those kinds of things, those are important things in the morning for our young kids, and then in the afternoon we do more of the active kind of learning for them. And so to be able to actually have more time in the morning with them before we hit lunch, which typically lunch and then they start to get tired. So having more of that time in the morning would make it easier for principals to be able to schedule and make sure that our kids have opportunities in the morning for that literacy block time, and to make sure we actually have it for more of our students than we do right now. So absolutely, we need to do that. And then as a parent, I know what it was like to have my son has gone all the way through. I'm a proud Hoover parent. He's a senior this year. And what I know about watching him is that the research bears out, and that when kids hit those mid-years, that middle school year and then go into high school, he was the student who bounded out of bed every day until we hit high school. And then he went right with the research, and his sleep patterns changed. And so watching him go through that and knowing that we're looking at this for kids is so important. And unfortunately, he will not be a part of this. He was very disappointed last year when this was tabled. He was hoping for a later start. But knowing that, again, this is about our kids. And as Lois said, if we look at the adults in this situation, yes, people are going to have to change, and sometimes that's hard, and we figure that out. But at the end of the day, if we're saying we need to do what's best for kids, then we are in full support of this. So thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our speakers, so I would bring it back to the board for Any questions or comments that you have before we go to our board policy discussion? Okay. Thank you very much.
I did.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. So I just had a couple comments or questions. One is, you mentioned the maximizing the staff, elementary staff, because they'll all be on the same schedule. What did you exactly, you want to elaborate on that?
It would be the staff that we have right now that are before school and after school. So when I mentioned volunteers, Metro.
Not the teachers.
No.
Get it? Oh, I get it. Okay, get that. Okay. And I don't know, this is for Tom, maybe. How can we get more student participation? I saw 814 students participated. That's not very many, or is it? Seemed like it to me. I don't know if you can answer that, but it'd be.
I actually was pretty pleased that 800 of them.
Really? Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I'm. I know. It's too bad. I mean, let's see. Yeah, and I guess the major thing for me is just the safety. But it sounds like I like that you have all those morning supports and the safe route, and it seems like you're thinking, and even in the curriculum, so sounds good. Thanks.
Right. So now I would ask my board colleagues to join with me in a.
I just wanted to, one of the big concerns that I had the last time was also the safety for our students in the morning, when it's early and during the winter when it's still dark. And so, I'm so glad that we really were thoughtful and purposeful about that. So thank you so much for your work on that.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, sorry, I know you.
It's all right.
I know a lot of this has to do with our resources, particularly the busing, and I apologize, I didn't send anything about this. Just trying to think, someone had posted something on Facebook earlier, and it was, about kids being out early, ultimately, waiting for buses. And I know students can only be on a bus for a certain amount of period of time. Do we know how early pickup would start and how that would impact our bus drivers?
Yeah, we do. The earliest time that students would be picked up would be 6:25. And so how it impacts bus drivers, I imagine that since all of our elementaries would be on one circuit, we'll have more drivers starting earlier, where now they're more tiered. Mm-hmm. But since we're going to have all hands on deck for that first go round for the elementaries, more of them will be driving that first route.
I have another one, and this is probably not been fully thought through at the school level, is where I'm thinking about, particularly for our after-school, before-school programming, ensuring that there's enough space. We're always going to be looking for, the volunteers and the staff to assist, particularly when it's a little bit more difficult, when it's broken up time or, just a few hours. Are we confident that we have enough space to accommodate the growth of, the need in the elementary schools for after school?
Yeah, we really are. We've continually encroached on more of the building for our after-school programs, especially because we've really grown those pretty dramatically. But essentially, the entire building has to be available if the entire building is needed. So if you think of the, staffing it, we think we have a good plan for staffing what we anticipate to be increased need in after-school programming. And since classes won't be in session, we may have to use more classrooms than we currently do and re-coordinate when cleaning happens, for instance, but nothing that's not navigable.
And buildings do that now. Building administrators work with after-school programming in order to support that because they know it benefits children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just trying to remember when I had the little guy.
Other board questions? Okay, hearing none. I'd like to ask the board members to now talk about the policy discussion relative to our role as it relates to bell times. I would offer that there are a couple of things that I think really are on the table tonight. One is whether or not, as a board, we want to be responsible for establishing policy relative to bell times. And if we do, that then would need to happen very quickly in order for us to make the decision on the proposal that's been advanced tonight. The second option that we have available to us is to defer action on this to the superintendent as his responsibility, and to not engage as a board in decision-making around this issue. There may be other issues that come up over the course of our time on this board that we want to also delegate, but this seems to be one of those that is immediately in front of us, that requires us to decide what our role is and whether or not we want to assume responsibility for bell times and officially take action, or whether or not we delegate that responsibility to our superintendent. So I think what's on the table at this point is where we stand on the need for policy.
I think,
yes.
Well, just, and I know you weren't here last year when we were going through this, but I think even though per, policy and discussions of what our role is, I think we set the expectation last year that this was something that we were going to be voting on. And reevaluating and looking at it as our position and role as a school board member is a great thing. We probably should have done that last year, but now that that ship's kind of already sailed, I think we would be doing a disservice to our constituents and our students if we changed course and that expectation. So that's where I set that.
So you would vote then that we establish policy that the board assumes responsibility for bell times?
Or a form of like an exception, somehow making it a way, because I don't know if that's something that the board would want to foresee forever, but in this particular situation, we can try to work something out to make that work.
I think Ms. Langford was next.
Yeah, at this point, I'm going to be in support of us creating a policy to oversee bell times for a few reasons. One of them being the timeline that this has happened. I think we had, and for some public background information, we had a work session this weekend where we talked a lot about the board's role and the superintendent's role and how we navigate those around certain issues and what we want our focuses and priorities to be. And one thing we talked about heavily is if we don't have a policy in our policy manual written out that delegates responsibility to us, it really isn't our responsibility to do. But that being said, we have had over a year and a half now of work going out. We've put the expectation out through the media. The public has been following and very involved in this process. I think we wouldn't have caught some of the concerns that came up with Ruby Van Meter had we not initially had this as a responsibility for ourselves. And I think that if this was just something that the superintendent would have had from the beginning, I mean, so much staff time and hours have been poured into this effort by this point. So I'm going to be in favor of us creating a policy and voting on school times.
Okay. Yes. Anderson.
Sure. I guess I think that if we're going to vote on it, we need to have a policy. If we don't have a policy, we shouldn't be voting on it. So, if the majority wants to vote on it, then we need to quickly write up a policy, I guess.
Ms. Ellsberg.
So I guess my position would be that despite the fact that we have had the work done, it's not work that would have not been done. This is the public outreach, the feedback, all of those things would have happened, the hours and hours poured into this. I understand that the happenstance that Ruby Van Meter and Smouse, that discussion did happen. I think that is fantastic that did happen. I don't think that there's anything wrong with realizing where we're at, what discussing and growing as a board, and realizing where our responsibilities lie, and moving forward with integrity around that. I look at a policy as being an imposition on the system. So is this something that our system needs? Do we need the board to be determining this from here on out? I'm not sure that we do. So I guess I would be in favor of delegating this to the superintendent.
Other board comments? Yes, Ms. De La Gardelle Shelley.
I think that our staff has made a pretty clear case for what is best for our students, and I think that we're getting some mixed community response for a variety of reasons. I think change, regardless of what kind of change, can be difficult, especially when it's been going on for a long time. But in the same switch of that, if we're thinking about the board making a decision on this, we do need to have a policy. And I'm not sure that where I stand on the board creating a policy for a couple of reasons. One is I'm still trying to determine if it's the role of a school board to determine bell times for our buildings on a day-to-day basis, because to me, coming from an education background, that feels like a pretty day-to-day operations decision that I would like our district to be able to be nimble and react to if something needs to happen, and that future boards may not be in the same place that we are with the depth of discussion that we've had to be able to respond to the needs of our administration in the future. And so I think I'm coming around to the idea that we need to have a policy if we're going to vote on it, but I'm not so sure. I think I'm leaning towards us not writing a policy, but I don't know if I fully set my position yet.
Okay. Yeah, help me fill out my tally here, Rob. I got 4 sections, so
Yes,
don't
ma'am.
add a 5th, please.
Oh, you're so disappointed in me then. Really, I think there's a few things that have to be sorted out, and they're not. They are in some ways mutually exclusive. On the one hand, this is an issue that's come before and been discussed at the board table, and so I think there is a responsibility to close that discussion and to make clear the board's beliefs on this proposal. I do not believe that were this a proposal that would have been brought to the board with the board more fully owning its lack of policy on this, that it was something that we necessarily would have acted to write a policy to take responsibility for it. So if you put the shoe on the other foot and you ask yourselves, okay, if the district came up here with this last plan, would we have acted to write a different policy, or would we have given instruction to the district that perhaps this is something you want to think more about? So everything that happened in the spring could very well have happened if it was not an action item for us. There are many things that come before this board that are not actionable items. So then the bigger question then is, do we as a board, and do we really as a community want the board to have responsibility for setting school hours? And for those keeping score at home, the school calendar by state law is our responsibility. School hours are not currently written in as our responsibility. I don't think that is a responsibility of the board. So I don't believe that there's necessity to write a policy to take ownership of that. I do believe that we have to close the conversation here, and I do believe we have to be clear from the board table about our individual belief on this policy, because there's been an expectation set that the board has some sort of has a role in approving it. I think ultimately this is the type of thing where you want your board to set overall policy. You don't want your board to make decisions that are going to determine how the individual buildings are run. That is the responsibility for the educational professionals that we hire. So perhaps I added a fifth category to your thing. Yeah, you know, you're a creative person. You can draw some lines and figure it out. But my overriding belief is that this is not an area that you, as a citizen, that I want my board owning, because I think I don't believe that we are trained to make that determination. Obviously, it's taken a heck of a lot of preparation to get us knowledgeable to this point. But I do believe that we have to have some sort of definitive statement about our position here.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Ellsworth.
I would agree with that.
Okay. All right, so this is sort of my attempt at trying to sort of synthesize what I heard. So we have a group that definitely believes that it should be delegated, and within that, we also have an individual that believes it should be delegated, but also based on where we are right now and the action that's taken place thus far, there is an obligation that the board somehow act in a way that suggests whether or not we support this so that then it can be executed by the staff accordingly. I also heard sort of the second part of that we do need to act so that the staff can do what they need to do, because we created an expectation when we took this up some time ago. I heard one individual who indicated that they believe that we should own this and we should indeed have a policy. And then I also heard two individuals, one that was approving the delegation, but also one that said that we should have a policy if we intend to vote. So that's all over the place. And what I might suggest is that we do some combination of a couple of things, and then I'm going to turn it over to the superintendent. And we can sort of discuss that after he makes his comments. I think that there is a strong desire for the board to express where we are on this issue so that the superintendent can execute. I think there's less of a desire for us to actually develop policy, but rather this really resides with the superintendent. So after we express where we are on the issue, delegate it to him so it can happen, but no policy is required. That's sort of what I think I heard in the aggregate based on what everyone said.
Consensus.
Let the superintendent make his comments, and then we'll come back, and if someone wants to make a motion, they can.
Yeah, I would just like to offer that prior to last year and the proposal that we brought forth in April, there have been a number of times, at least under my superintendency, where we have modified bell schedules for a variety of reasons, very small adjustments, relatively small adjustments to bell times for certain schools for, a variety of reasons. And we always, communicate actively with parents and so forth, but it was nothing this dramatic. Whether it's in policy or not, we would have brought a plan of this magnitude to the board for consideration, even if it weren't under the board's purview to approve, because I certainly don't want to go down a road that wouldn't be supported by the board. Sometimes it's a little difficult to garner that without the formal step of a vote being taken, but we do it a lot. Maybe on things that don't feel as immediately impactful to every single person in the community, but certainly we would have brought a proposal for a bell time change, even if we thought the board was not going to vote on it, so that the board is well informed and hears public commentary as well. So I just want you to know that, on small things and specific to a bell time policy, I don't believe the board really wants to do that. I understand the compunction to want to do that now, but this is something that we would have brought certainly forward for board discussion, even if it didn't require board action, before we would have moved forward. So I'll just offer that for what it's worth.
We're not voting. Yeah, we're not voting on the bell times. but we can vote on whether or not we need a policy.
Can we have a comment?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to ask, so if we don't have a policy and we don't vote on this in the future or now, what is our, what would have I don't know what would have happened, but I know there was a Ruby Van Meter and Smouse. So
Yeah, I think the superintendent just indicated that typically issues of this magnitude aren't things that wouldn't be discussed at this table. They wouldn't be discussed with an expectation that we would be taking action. So they would still be advancing proposals that they're contemplating for feedback, but not necessarily action of the board.
we could always pull it and discuss it, or no.
Likely it wouldn't have to be anything that would be pulled.
Okay.
Unless it was something that was on consent, but an issue again of this magnitude is likely something that would be considered under other, and to the extent whoever is in board leadership at the time is establishing or setting the agenda with the superintendent and the secretary, they would make the determination about placement on the agenda, but likely it would be an item that would come up under the regularly scheduled items and not necessarily on consent.
Okay.
So, yes, Rob.
Just a fair way of looking at it is to think back on your respective board tenures, and I know that's going to be tough for you, Kirsten. But if you can think of a time when something with as wide-ranging of an impact as this proposal did not come to the board, whether it was for action or for notification and discussion. I don't think that there has been, but that would be a good way of looking at this scenario.
Absolutely. So we did not post on the agenda that we would be actually taking a vote on a policy tonight. So what I'd like for us to do is get a sense of what the consensus is on this, and then take a formal or provide specific direction to the superintendent relative to the proposal that has been presented tonight. So I don't believe that we will take action, nor can we, but we can certainly respond to the proposal that is before us relative to whether or not we support the superintendent moving forward. So silence in this case is affirmation. So if you do not support the superintendent moving forward, that would be important for him to know right now. Okay.
Sorry.
Others? Okay. So I believe that at this point, the board has spoken, and we are supporting the proposal to move forward with the bell times as have been established with the Platinum Plan. And we appreciate all of the time and attention that the superintendent and staff have put towards this, and we look forward to implementation of the plan in the upcoming school year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we do have one additional item on the agenda for this evening, and that item is the equity plan. Again, this is not an action item. This is a discussion item. So I will turn it over to the superintendent.
Okay, so we have created an equity plan that we've brought forward to the board several months ago, and asked for board input and feedback on that, and the team will tell you more about how we've involved community members, excuse me, community members, families, and so forth, and staff in the evolution of this plan. And this is not called for by board policy. However, in many of our board policies, the idea of equity is specifically and sometimes not specifically referenced. And we certainly, as a district, have been working very hard at improving the level of equity and the level of cultural proficiency with which we serve our students and how we interact with one another. So I appreciate, first of all, I appreciate from the board, those of you who sent us feedback that has been incorporated into this plan. This has really been a tremendous amount of good work and absolutely the right work. And we've gotten comments from various districts around the country asking, so how is it that you're doing this? And can we have your plan? And those kinds of things, because we don't see it working super well anywhere. And we think we can, it hasn't been working to the level that we think it needs to be working in our district. And so this team will walk you through the plan. We're going to make this a pretty tight presentation because we know you've seen the bulk of it before, with some refinements, and also adding a little bit more color to what you received the last time in terms of where we are with following what this plan lays out. And there have been some exciting new developments even this year. And also, as Noel referenced in the literacy report, this is a plan that's literally informing our day-to-day work and how we look at the results we're getting and how we look at how we can improve the results that we're getting. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt and Brenda, Jomara and Mary. Thank you all.
Well, good evening, board. Thank you very much. For what it's worth to tie these conversations together, I've got an almost 2-year-old that's waking up at 2 a.m. every morning, so I'll be in favor of an early start time at 3-year-old preschool of about 2:30 a.m., if that's something that we're also considering. If you'll notice the bright faces that we have in the audience tonight, we've got several students out here that are gaining their hours for class and engaging in their civic responsibility and civic duty. And so also, if we could, I know this is a tight presentation, but I was planning on speaking very slowly so that we can draw this out for about 4 hours so that they can accumulate all the hours necessary for each of them. And so if we're all in support of students, we'll just work on that tonight. So about midnight, we'll be ready to roll.
You don't need to speak, by past precedent, you do not need to speak slowly to drag anything out, Matt Smith.
That might put us here till Wednesday. Do we have the PowerPoint? Is that, do you see that?
No, we don't have it.
Because I can continue with it.
Have one?
What did you say? Was not one submitted to be on the?
Yeah.
Have it? Oh, yeah.
PDF of the PowerPoint?
The PDF of the plan in front of us.
Okay. Well, this will be a very tight presentation based on that. Okay. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, so to begin with, and again, a lot of this is a conversation, right? Because as we speak around equity and a plan for equity, it includes the topics that we've already discussed at the board table today. It's about doing what's best for kids, all kids, especially our students that have been traditionally marginalized and somewhat left out of the system. And so that's what this equity plan is about, and that's exactly what it addresses. And so this is not a hope. There's a slide, I wish you could see it, that's beautiful, I'll read it to you. It says, a goal without a plan is just a wish. Or it's a hope. And what we all know is that hope is not a strategy. You got to have an actual strategy to address equity and the systems of inequities within your system. And I'm hitting that button as if it's going to advance the slide, but there's no need for that. The district's mission speaks to the graduates possess the knowledge, skills, and abilities to be successful at the next stage of their lives. What's inherent in that mission is that we are equitable in our approach to students, that we close student opportunity and outcome gaps, and that all students are learning, thriving, and belonging. We've got 7 strategies that will be broken down for you later on in the presentation, but each of these strategies are oriented and supported by 3 bucket areas. And I think we've spoken about these at the board table. It's learning, thriving, and belonging. And so as we've developed this plan collaboratively and been very thoughtful and intentional about how we address a system of equity, we place all of these activities and strategies into these 3 core areas: learning, thriving, and belonging. These 3 areas will not change. Over the years, though, as we analyze metrics and outcomes of strategies, the strategies could change, but the core areas of examining learning, thriving, and belonging for our students, staff, and families will not alter. We're also looking to create a significant amount of alignment with this plan. It began, and it's an inception, with looking at the board's KPIs and then structuring this plan to meet district goals that are aligned to the board's KPIs, and also thereby tightly coupling our school improvement plans and our school improvement goals to be aligned to the district KPIs. Meaning that what we discuss here at the board table at a systems level around equity should be what we discuss at a granular classroom level around every individual student. That's the tight alignment that we're looking for with this particular plan. There are two major parts of the plan, and one thing I want to make sure that I include is that we believe that equity work should be divided into programming and compliance. Both need to be aligned, but programming should touch every chief officer, every department at central office. Compliance is housed in HR. Most districts focus on the compliance part of the work because it is what is required by law. We're going above and beyond and placing a strong focus on the programming part of the work because we believe that this is how equity gets embedded into the fabric of an organization through education, alignment, and the development of tools that allow for everyone to do their work through an equity lens. This plan is about culture. It's about changing culture and shifting culture. An organization's culture reflects the predominant ways of thinking, behaving, and working. This plan is aimed towards shifting a culture of how we look, how we work, how we voice our concerns, how do we raise at this table and at the table in classrooms around who's advantaged and disadvantaged by these decisions, by these situations, and we look at every unique individual student just as that, unique, individual, and as assets to our system. The equity plan process actually began in January of last year. The process development was collaborative, involving internal leaders representing 15 of the district's departments. Once the plan was in draft form, we began gathering feedback from internal and external stakeholders. The internal feedback was from the Office of Schools, Office of Academics teams, as well as 25 principals in our system. External feedback was garnered from community partners such as Marine Credit Union, YMCA, and El Éxito. There were 6 families also engaged with this process and provided feedback to us about the plan, and we also included 15 students of color. Once the feedback was gathered, it was incorporated into the plan, and it was shared with Prince George's County Public Schools, Broward County Public Schools, Cleveland Public Schools, Omaha Public Schools, Roseville schools. We've also had engaging conversations and asked for feedback from the Equity Collaborative, which is an equity coaching consulting firm based in San Francisco. We've engaged in conversations with Honeybee Equity Consulting Firm based in Atlanta. All of these opportunities to speak to not only other districts, but these consulting firms provided us invaluable learning and invaluable feedback around some things that they've already done and some things that we're currently doing that they are now going to start doing based on the conversations with the team at the table and several of the folks that are in the audience tonight. The feedback was very positive, and many of those districts actually came to visit Des Moines to see exactly how this is playing out and how this came about. So the equity plan in a nutshell. There are 7 strategies organized around 3 core areas that we've already talked about: learning, thriving, and belonging. As our work around equity continues and matures, these strategies, again, may change based on the data that we collect and the impact that it's having. The core values or the core areas will not. Learning, thriving, and belonging will continue to be our core values and our core areas that we will place these strategies and activities into. The equity plan structure in and of itself is built around a logic model. And so each of the 7 strategies are accompanied by various activities that the district will implement, monitor, and then measure for impact. The structure of the plan and the logic model uses a series of if-then statements. If these activities are accomplished, then these planned services or outputs have been delivered. If the services or outputs are delivered, then there will be benefits for students, families, and staff. If the outcomes are achieved, then the organization or the system will be impacted. We will benefit as a system based on this. It's a series of if-then statements. Again, the purpose of this particular logic model is because it actually allows us to link our actions to the key performance indicators that we talk about here in the boardroom. It allows us to monitor for success, and it also allows us to assist in the communication to our stakeholders at large around how our actions are connected to outcomes and outputs.
So Mary is the person who has guided our work in using the logic model and implementing this with our equity work. So I just wondered if you have anything you want to add, or?
No, Matt did a great job of explaining the logic model. So this has really been a labor of love for the past almost year now, and just that there was a change this past year in that I and my team report directly to Tom now, and that really has freed me up to work cross-departmental with folks. So this really was a result of that, was sitting down with folks from all different departments and aligning the work. So Jamar and I co-facilitate a group that meets monthly, that monitors this plan, that checks off, yes, we did that, here's the data that proves we did that, and we upload it to the plan. So we checked off everything that's in the plan actually happened in 16, 17, and this is also a living document with that committee. You know, so as we learn things, we change the document monthly as well.
So Mary just stole my first slide, but one of the things I want to say about this work, I had the experience of doing all of the cultural sensitivity training. Do y'all remember that from the 80s? Were you alive then? And this work is so much deeper and so much richer than anything we ever dreamed possible could be done. And so the one thing that I would say that I'm most pleased about and excited about is the difference that this is going to make for students, because now we use the equity lens with every single decision we make, with every single bit of curriculum we examine, the way we're looking at data. So the equity team that Mary mentioned, there are 15 different departments represented on that team. And it's just one of 5 equity teams. We'll share more about the other teams in just a minute. But the purpose of the team is obviously to align all of the work for all DMPS departments to use that equity lens in examining everything we plan, monitor, and adjust for the district as it relates to our equity goals. And also, this connects directly to our Males of Color report as well and the work we're doing there. Secondly, the cultural proficiency term that we used a lot previously, prior to really thinking about what equity means and what cultural proficiency means, that's the skill set that we have to have as individuals to be able to move this work forward. And so a lot of that is the personal side of developing our skills, and we have gone through, I know the superintendent, Matt and I, our executive directors and our directors have gone through the evaluation of taking the IDI, which is the instrument that assesses where we are, and then we begin our individual coaching with Jamada and our individual work with each other to improve our skill levels when it comes to the equity framework. Equity, as you know, refers to the system, so that's the overarching picture that we want to think about, and it's the tool we use to monitor progress with our equity work. Is called the equity profile. Some of you, I think you had said, had experienced the color-coded tool that we use that really takes a close examination of where schools are, where each building can then set goals and assess where they are in meeting the needs of all of their subgroups with that tool and the results that it shows. We have the ability to look at a network level, a district level, and a multi-year equity data level as well.
Can I say something?
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
go ahead.
of course. No.
So the tool we're using to assess where we are in our ability to connect across difference is the IDI, which is a reliable and validated tool to measure where you are at in terms of your personal skill. And the tool we are using to measure equity outcomes by building network and system is the equity profile. And that is a tool that, like Brenda said, breaks our data by subgroups and also shows current status and growth. So we can see both, because some of the schools might be in the red and orange areas which are not good, but have a growth in the blue and green areas, which indicates to us that long-term they'll be okay. Whatever they're doing is working. And so we really wanted to look at growth as well as current status with that tool. And we can have 9 different views of that equity profile so that directors can look at it by network. We can look at it by school, so the principals and the leadership teams and the teachers can see that. And we can also look at it as a system to measure our progress with equity for all subgroups.
And one of the nice things about the tool, it's allowed us to see those schools that were in the blue zone and to go to them and say, what are you doing differently? And what we discover is the strategies and the skills that they're developing in their staff has made the difference and has made it possible for them to move into the blue zone, which is the good zone with this tool. So equity and cultural proficiency, obviously equity is our end goal, but in order to be able to create an equity-driven school system, we need to become culturally proficient. And one of the reasons that we all decided to take the IDI to begin with was so that we could start improving on ourselves before we asked the schools to begin improving upon the work that they were doing, because we feel like as leaders in the district, we have to be the ones who are out in front of this work and really being honest with where we are on the continuum and continuing to get better.
And I'd like to add that our professional development has been organized around this as well. So last year, our leadership professional learning community sessions focused on the self-work, which is understanding your cultural identity, your background, your biases. And the self-work is the beginning, and it never comes off the table. And then we move up to a layer that it's practices. And so it's culture responsive teaching, curriculum, behavior, materials, resources. And that is the layer we are focusing on this year for our professional learning. And then you move on to the systems layer, that it's the policies, that it's the board work, it's the evaluations, and all of the systems tools that we need to put in place to support the system's growth.
Thanks. So the data analysis tool that we talked about is a complete shift for us in how we look at how we're doing in the district, how we analyze data to use the equity lens, a collaborative process, and it includes stakeholders' input, which is absolutely critical to this work. The framework is built into the tool, which is keeps us on track for everything that we're doing around this work. We have developed, thanks to the support and work of Jamana, I would say I'll give her full credit for this, 5 equity teams in the district that are addressing different areas. The one that we mentioned earlier was the equity monitoring team, and that's the group we meet monthly, and we examine where we were. Last year, we were able to meet all of our actions and our activities that we had slated in our plan for 16-17. We also set goals for this year, and we continuously monitor and update those as we're working together. And so that includes Matt and I, directors from several departments. All ed is at the table, gifted and talented, ELL, special education, school climate, community schools, community ed, and advanced placement. So we want to make sure that we have a wide range of representation in terms of the team that's monitoring the plan. Then the other group was the equity professional learning team that Jamana mentioned. So we have a leadership PLC that happens 6 times a year with our building principals and their leadership teams. And some of you, I think, have been to some of those events at the Iowa Events Center. And those are equity sessions that started last year and have continued through this year. And then Jamara is going to speak about the District Student Advisory Committee, which we're all very excited about.
Yes, and just I'd like to add for the professional learning team, the first year, Matt and I pretty much led the sessions together. This year, we have added teacher leaders, assistant principals, and principals to the team who plans and facilitates the sessions with me. And so we have that building voice in the work we're doing, which I'm pretty excited about. Hopefully in the future, I'd love to add the students' voice too. So have the students help us facilitate those sessions as well, and so that we can learn from them. The district advisory committee, the student advisory committee, is just being formed. Our first meeting will be December 5th, and it's a group of 20 high school students from the DMPS. They are all students of color, and you know, they range from 9th through 12th grade. We have a really good mix of students that we felt were not engaged, were not academically succeeding, were not attending. And so we wanted the students who had never had an outlet to share their perspective with district leadership. And this team was gonna help us as we pilot a new data tool to analyze data looking at the different groups we serve. This team is gonna be our go-to group to get perspective on the reasons we feel our equity concerns are, and if they agree or not, and if they can add to our perspective. Because a lot of times we try to brainstorm our problems and our concerns based on our own filters, and we don't consider different perspectives, and that's important for the equity work we do. So having community involvement, student voice, and family engagement in the data analysis we do is really gonna be crucial for us moving forward. So this district student advisory committee is gonna help with us with that. And then we have a team that it's called the School-Based Equity Leads team, and this team is gonna be formed January 2018. And this team is going to be composed by 44 equity leads who are gonna be in 44 different buildings this year, starting January, and they're gonna be people who will help guide the equity work at the building level. So they will support the principal and the leadership team, having coaching conversations around equity when they look at data, providing the IDI to the building level staff and leadership team, also becoming part of the leadership team so that when they are collaborating, they bring equity to the forefront. And we are very excited to have this team. They're gonna meet with me once a month, and we're gonna have some external support for their professional development. And then the last team is the Stakeholder Engagement Advisory Committee, and that is the merging of the SIAC committee, the School Improvement Advisory Committee, with the Equity Advisory Committee. I am very excited about this merging because I do think it should be one thing, you know, and this is gonna be another chance we'll have to bring family and community perspective to the data we're looking at in regards to equity and the issues we have. So it's gonna be a very good opportunity for us to combine both things.
The other thing we wanted to mention are the external partnerships that we're not at liberty to announce yet. But those are the groups that will be supporting the professional development for the equity leads that will go on throughout January through June of next year. And then organizations that will support the certification of intercultural development inventory coaches. And that's the IDI that I mentioned that we took the survey that we want to expand for other staff members to be able to take. But right now we don't have the coaching capacity. She is one person. She's also getting someone else ready for that work as well. So we're excited to maybe be able to broaden that so that more people in the district can see where they are on the continuum and begin to do their journey of becoming more skillful at cultural proficiency. And then lastly, the organizations that will help us assess the needs for equity focus at the building level. Some of our future goals, just so you know what we'll be working on and what's on the targets for this year: development of an equity-driven leadership evaluation tool. And I don't know if Matt wants to speak more about that in a little bit. But we also want to continue to align Schools for Rigor with equity. And if you had our slide, you will see coming up how that connects with the school maturity model that we use with our Schools for Rigor. And identify supports to expand equity work into business and finance, operations, and HR. So we want all departments in the district to have the same advantage that Office of Academics and Office of Schools have had doing this work. And then the final one would be to add qualitative data to equity work monitoring. And just as a side note, Mary got the Gallup results today and a little bit of data that we've received in terms of how we're doing. The one question on the survey for staff is, I am more culturally proficient because of the efforts of Des Moines Public Schools, and that went up this year. So we're very pleased to see that result. Finally, the last thing that we shared with you, and I don't know if it's in your PDF, but it's the school instructional maturity model. And that is where we ask schools to examine where they are on the continuum for conditions for learning, strengthening standards-based instruction, collaboration, standards-based curriculum and instruction, and data-driven systems. And the overarching component of that is equity that we keep at the top. And that's just, it's become a part of everything we do, and which is as it should be. But the one thing I wanted to say about Jamara's work and Mary's work, they hold our feet to the fire and make sure that we're following the plan as we said, and making sure we do the adjustments. They even give us homework. Some of us complete it on time as required, but I couldn't be more excited about this work. I do think this is going to move us toward becoming the model for urban education, because no one else that we know of in the country is doing this kind of work at this level. So we're very excited, and we hope you'll join us. It's fun.
So I believe you have the plan itself as a PDF.
itself.
We would love to engage in that, which the PowerPoint is just a very shortened version of the plan, obviously. So the opportunity to engage in conversation around your feedback on the plan and what you see as opportunities for us to continue to revise and draft some things to better serve our students, families, and staff. We're obviously, that's what we're here for.
Do you remember that? Okay.
Board comments? Yes.
More function than name.
Well, for starters, thank you. Really excited that we have a plan. I think we had the opportunity to go to a conference that was full of educators this last week, and I'm just really excited that our district is leading, or at least taking this issue at the forefront. We're up here discussing equity within our schools and for our students, and so it's really exciting to me. And some of this feedback I already sent, I could see some of it was incorporated. The strategies and core focus areas, thriving, learning, belonging, that's really encouraging. It seems spot on. I love, you guys lifted up several things that just seem really exciting. You know, the equity leads that are happening in the schools, the fact that you all went through the IDI training in terms of central office, all of that. My next comments are going to be more in light of the work that we just did this weekend with AJ, and from a board perspective on where we sit into this conversation. Because you've mentioned at the end, hopefully you'll join in. And one thing we really want to communicate as a board is like, we are doing this work together. And so I know all of our hearts are in this for our students. One thing that I think, Matt, you were asking for feedback about how this could look, how we could improve this plan or help make it better. I'm giving my individual feedback, but we were specifically challenged this weekend to talk about impacts and outcomes. And particularly from a board perspective, when we talked about our respective roles between us as a board and then the superintendent and staff, we just highlighted again, as a board, the role of the board is to focus on, here's the outcomes we want to see for our students, here's the impacts we want to see for our students, staff, you all figure out the means. And I think in this conversation tonight, I heard a lot of really awesome means. I heard a lot of really awesome activities and things that are going on in terms of help move this work forward. Where I'm seeing some gaps at this point in terms are, what's the impacts that we want for students? What do we want to see as a result of all of these activities that we're doing? And when we look at the plan, it's a little general right now at this point. I see, oh, this isn't my computer missteps, I can't pull it up. But in our impact section, we talk a lot about, thank you. I'm looking, let's see at strategy 2. Adopt a comprehensive equity professional learning system for the district. Improved learning, I'm looking at underneath the 2017-2018, and this is just one example, but I think it's pretty consistent throughout the plan. Improved learning environments for all students, specifically students of color. And this is this disproportionality in percent of students receiving 0 to 1 level 2 office referrals, director of assessment, data and evaluation. I think there's space and room for us to really narrow in on what are the specific targets What do we want to see? When we say disproportionality in percent of students receiving 0 to 1 level office referrals, just like in our monitoring reports, what's our target goals?
Well, what we are trying to do is create a district-wide vision for equity and have some action steps to execute it. So when we come to what's already articulated in the board goals and priorities, we have a method to approach that. So if you look at 4.1, all the 4.1 policies, or I shouldn't say all of them, but especially 4.1.1, we're going to have goals articulated in there. This is the means that we use in terms of the equity part of it to achieve those.
And I hear that. Again, I think my perspective is if we have a plan, the plan is to achieve the goals and the outcomes for students. And those have to be articulated up front in this plan. I think.
Well, okay. So I hear what you're saying, and we can certainly put that in there. But as Matt described earlier on, and I'll make sure you guys get the presentation, the idea was let's take what the board's monitoring and make sure we have a plan to accomplish those goals. So we want this to be fluid in response to what at the board table we've set as our priorities, if that makes sense.
If you look at,
the impact is the males of color KPIs.
Yeah.
That is what's displayed in that last column, that long-term impact.
Mm-hmm.
So so it's designed to perfectly align with these are the activities that we believe will lead to these short-term indicators, the mid-term indicators, and these long-term KPIs. So you can kind of think of outputs, outcomes, and impact as short, medium, long-term.
Sure.
So those are under the strategies. I don't know if you.
Nope, I'm looking at them. And this, like, I understand, you all, this is work that we're embarking on. It's very personal. It's personal to all of us. I want to reemphasize again, I think, I understand what you're saying, Tom. Like, I know we're going into a KPI session where we're going to really delineate. There might need to be like a policy that's written about our equity work, which we, from a board perspective, which we've talked about this last weekend. I'm going to lift up again that I think we have to be specific in what we want to see in terms of our outcomes and our impacts.
Yep. So
a separate set of goals not tied to what the board's already articulated as goals. I just want to make sure I'm clear on this.
No. Go ahead. Should I respond? Nope, not separate. But this is a very detailed, comprehensive plan. So we have our overarching priorities that we've articulated. We'll hopefully after this week have goals that are more specific. But in terms of the implementation, in terms of staff work for the plan, like this is, in my opinion, this is you all writing out the plan of how we're going to achieve those very long, overreaching goals. And the impacts, I feel like there's room for us, not to be more specific in terms of what we want to see for these desired outputs or inputs.
So let me just offer that as the plan exists now, it really sort of exists as staff work. It doesn't exist juxtaposed against a board policy relative to equity. So I think what we have is really what the staff is giving us. I think in order for us to really fully evaluate it in a way that brings value from a board perspective, there has to be an equity policy so that we are able to equate what the staff has designed as the means against a policy that really articulates the ends that we want to achieve. So I think we have one piece of it without having the other piece. So I understand everything that you're saying, Deanna, but I think we have to receive what we have tonight, recognizing that it really is the staff's work that they intend to do around equity that really at this point for the board isn't tied to anything beyond what the staff says they want to do around this particular area or issue. So let's keep that in mind, because I think if we have a policy, we then have the ability to sort of put those pieces side by side to evaluate it in a much broader way. So I'm going to ask you to just maybe put a pin in that, recognizing that this is just one piece of the equity work that we need to be doing as a district. Does that make sense?
I respect your opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
I loved the part where you talked about each of us individually had to look at where you were as a staff. And I think as I'm reflecting on that, and you talked about the different layers of, then we add our practices, and then we talk about this as a system, I think, and maybe I don't want to misspeak for anyone else, but I think I'm chomping at the bit a little bit to talk about that as a system, because it was something that I've reflected a lot on when I took a seat at this board, was that I'm now the system. And so I want to make sure that we're working as a system all in the same direction. And I think we are, but I think some of this conversation comes from wanting to formalize that a little bit more. So when you say that you hope that we'll join you in the work, I think we're ready to do that. And so I think for me, I want some more information about ways that I should be doing that. And I don't know if that comes from staff, if that comes from the board, but I think I'm ready to talk about that as a system. And so maybe we're getting a little bit ahead of your layers, but I just want to applaud you for all the hard work that you're doing, and I'm so excited about the number of teams and the amount of training and everything that's going into this, because you talk about being a leader and then you see the hours of work that went into this, and I'm just blown away. So I think we're all ready to go there, and I think that's where some of this is coming from. So,
other board questions, comments?
Yeah, I think it's excellent. And when I talk to teachers and staff, one thing that they are very happy about is the equity. It is the cultural proficiency trainings and different activities that you've presented to them. Really think that they've it seems to have been taken very positively, and I think that you're you're gaining, I don't know, I guess more trust and more. I mean, I just think it's a bigger team, right? And that's what you're trying to achieve. I had a question about the 44 equity leads. How is that? Are those like teachers or staff, and then so then they also do that, or how does that work? Like
it's a stipend position, so we don't want to have that position be role dependent. We want the right people on board for that.
Okay.
So we're asking principals when we send the application in December to the building level to look at people who can include, who have the aptitudes and the skills and dispositions for this work, who are passionate. And the role really doesn't matter. It could be a classified person, it could be a certified staff,
That's
it could
great.
be a teacher. We want the right people that are passionate and want to do it. And they're going to be paid a stipend, and they have a job description, and they will be a key part in the building, supporting the cultural proficiency, professional development with the principal and the leadership team, and also having the equity conversations. So.
And then do you know like how much extra time yet, or is this just kind of in the
Well,
planning?
we know how much training it's going to take. I think 4 days is what we had scheduled. But then the work in the building, we really don't know yet until they experience it, how much is going to be required of them.
So they will undergo more extensive training for supporting with equity, and then they will also meet with me once a month, and the stipend will cover that. But the exact number of hours they will devote to doing that in the buildings, I think will depend on how effective they are, I assume, and how ready the building is as well,
Right.
So there's lots of variables there.
I could see a scenario where someone is been trained, ready, but then maybe the building or environment isn't quite ready. So how would you support that person?
Well, I think it'll be a nice complement to the Leadership PLC work that we're doing, because the expectation every month when we work with leadership teams is that will then go back to their building in some way for the early out Wednesdays. So that person then would be the one that they would look to help support and plan the professional development that needs to be the follow-up in that building. Or maybe they've identified something in their equity profile that they see that they need to focus more on, and so they would be the person who could help lead the work for that.
And the other thing,
So we don't know yet how much time.
Yeah, I know.
And the other thing too, Heather, that we're thinking about is The buildings now have EL leads, and they also, some of them have community school coordinators, which is built around equity. And they also have the bilingual family liaisons. And so we're helping that these 4 people can be a little team to push for equity at the building level and support the principal and the leadership team if that works. So we are gonna be very intentional to create opportunities for these 4 professionals to network and get to know each other well and understand their roles well so that they can collaborate.
Okay, thank you.
Other board questions, comments? Okay. Thank you very much. We've got to get to work on our policy. So I believe that officially concludes our formal agenda for tonight. We have a few items in our information only, the preliminary plans for Madison Elementary, the gymnasium addition, and also an audit committee update. The next item is the chair's report. We are going to be doing agenda planning first thing in the morning. Our next board meeting is not scheduled until December 12th, so we won't see each other for a while, but I will give you an update following agenda planning tomorrow. And so as not to inundate your calendars before the end of the year, I don't anticipate that we will at this point have any work sessions scheduled, but I do believe that after the first of the year, we will likely be moving, of course, into budget, but there are some other things that we'll need to focus our attention on in addition to the work of the committees that needs to be ongoing. So
We
is there
did have
something?
a placeholder for December 10th
We did.
for AJ to come back,
Oh, we did.
and I don't know if we need to.
The one thing that we did say we wanted to try to accomplish before the end of the year is the KPIs. And I will just query everybody again on that December 10th date to see if that still works and see if he's available as well, and staff, because that's really sort of a joint board staff conversation. So just anticipate that you'll hear from us on that. And outside of that, I hope everyone has a wonderful and blessed Thanksgiving. For those of you that are traveling, safe passage. And for those of you that are staying around and just being with family, I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. It's a beautiful time of year. Turn it over to the superintendent. I'd like to thank the board for their great work on Sunday, and apologize to Deanna for getting stuck next to me. To have to work as my partner. And I just want to really wish all of our almost 5,000 staff a big thank you for everything that's been accomplished so far leading up to this break. And I hope everyone takes advantage of some time away from their schools to rejuvenate and spend time with family and to reflect and come back recharged in about a week. Thank you. Great. Without objection, our meeting is adjourned.